Erev Shabbat Shalom. Imagine you're walking down the street and you see a man with a shaved head, with blood dripping from his ear, from his fingers, and from his toes. What would your first reaction be upon seeing this man? If it were me, I'd probably run the other way. In the time of the temple, in the time of the Mishkan, in the time of our Parsha, you would have a very different reaction though. If you saw a man with a shaved head, or a woman, shaved head, blood on the ear, on the finger, and on the toe, you'd be very happy. You would be very happy because this was a person who was being welcomed back into the community. Through what to our eyes is probably a bizarre ritual, in this week's Parsha, it describes how the Kohen would welcome someone back who was temporarily rendered tameh, impure, who had to be out of the camp for various reasons, various bodily reasons, health reasons, and then they were brought back in. And there was a whole set of rituals and anointing and shaving and blood and all this stuff that was done to facilitate and clearly demarcate the person's return back to society. And this was a time for celebration. It was a wonderful thing. This person had been gone and now they've returned. I've been thinking about this Parsha a lot, of course, in our current reality. The experience of being isolated, of being quarantined, of being aside, apart. I think that's something we all can now relate with. Maybe we never could before, but after the past year, of course we can. And now this experience of reintegration and the complexities of reintegration is something that I think is on a lot of our minds. How do we come back? In the times of the Torah, in the times of our Parsha, in the times of the Mishkan and the Mikdash, there was a very clear ritual process, and there was a Kohen who mediated that process. There was a Kohen who would assess you and say, okay, you're ready to come back. This is what you have to do. These are the steps you have to take. This is the anointing you must do, and once you do it, you're fully in. Today, of course, we don't have an individual Kohen demarcating and telling every person how they can and should not re-enter. We have a million different Kohanim. We have Fauci, we have the CDC, we have what our cousin does, we have our neighbors, we have the community. There's all these different bodies and people and entities giving advice or kind of mediating this transition back for us, and it's kind of confusing. It's kind of confusing. Not only is it confusing, I think for a lot of people, it's still very hard. You know, there are some of us who have jumped right back into communal life. Thank God, shul every week, more and more people are coming. Kiddush outside, some people jumped in and it was just a wonderful experience for them to be just fully back into it, no problem. Leaving the house, getting back into stuff, just feels great. But there are also some of us who it's very hard. For some of us who are still afraid, for many for good reason. For some of us who have gotten used to a life that's more isolated, for better or for worse. For some of us that have social anxiety already, dealing with crowds or people or social situations can already be stressful. For a lot of us, it's actually challenging to get back. It's hard. So what I want to offer, since we don't have a Kohen to dip our ears and fingers and toes in blood and shave our heads and tell us, time to go back, I want to offer to be the Kohanim for one another. I want to invite us to think of ourselves all as mediators for one another in how we reintegrate and reconnect to community. It's so important. We all have a role to play in this. You know, I want to tell you, we had our outdoor Kiddush last week for the first time, and it was wonderful, so great. But someone told me that they came to the Kiddush, and actually no one said hi. And I was so devastated to hear this. And I was at that Kiddush, and I include myself in the guilt, in the communal guilt for having someone come back to an event for the first time in over a year, and not to feel welcomed. So it's really incumbent upon each and every one of us to look out for one another. If we see someone we haven't seen, if we see someone we think it might be their first time back to something, or even not, their second or third or fifth time back, to keep reaching out and being that force of welcome and of communal reintegration for one another. Even if we are feeling a little awkward or a little socially distanced or not sure how to handle ourselves after all this time away, to take that extra step and to try to be welcoming for someone else, to be that Kohen for someone else. And I'll tell you, for me in my life, situations of social anxiety, it's actually really helped for me to just flip it around and to try to be that support and welcoming and connection for someone else. I can remember social events where I felt awkward or isolated, and I found someone else who also felt that way, and we started talking and developed beautiful friendships. So each and every one of us can be that force of reaching out and reintegrating. We don't have a Kohen, we don't have visual signs like head shaving and blood. Maybe for the best, it'd probably be a little weird for us today if we did that every time someone came back to shul, shave their head and dip their fingers and toes in blood. But we all can kohen, we all can bechahen, we all can serve one another, we all can be there for one another in that way. And to reach out when we see someone at an event, and also to reach out even more, to call someone we haven't seen in a long time, say, hey, how you doing? Have you been at anything in the last couple of weeks? Have you come to shul? Have you been to a kiddush? Do you want to come? Do you want to go together? Here in this shul, we do believe that community is good, and that connection is good, and that being together safely is good. It's good spiritually, it's good socially, it's good emotionally, it's good physically. These are good things. And it's time to safely reintegrate into those things. But we need help. We need each other. We need to recognize that it might be hard. We need to recognize that some of us need to be asked or invited or reached out to. We need to serve each other in that way. So let this be a Shabbat of continuing reintegration, following the model of Tazria-Metzora, of Kohanim, who helped people facilitate their re-entry back into community. And let's do that for one another. Shabbat Shalom.